Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's Divorce Town webinar on divorce and real estate. Should I stay or should I sell? We're going to have a great webinar today. I have some very distinguished guests that I am ready to share with you. And before I do, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Lisa Decker, the founder and CEO of USA.com and DivorceMoneyMatters.com. And as a CDFA, a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, and a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce, I can tell you that this is one of the most contentious and difficult areas of our job. And so having the right references and resources to reach out to, the right professionals to tap into who have all the knowledge that I need to be able to assess what's best for clients is critical, because divorce does take a team. And so I'm happy to introduce some of my team members today. And I'm going to share their bios with you as they present. But we've got Mike Congemi with Appraisal Work. Say hello, Mike.
Hi. How's everybody doing today?
And we have Tony Scarparo, a certified lending professional with North Point Mortgage.
Hey, good afternoon.
And Pam Evans, who is an associate broker and realtor with Century 21, and she's got a whole bunch of designations that I'll be sharing with you. So glad to have you folks with me today. Always a pleasure to present with you and to work with you. I've worked with all of these folks, and we can't get any better. Top notch here. All right. So first up, we're going to have Mike Congemi. So if Tony and Pam would go off camera, there we go. Mike Congemi is principal of the valuation firm Appraisal Works, LLC. His firm specializes in valuations for estate, divorce, bankruptcy, surety bonds, and pre-listing. Appraisal Works also works with investors and lenders to mitigate risk in their investments via forensic valuations. And Mike is a certified residential appraiser in Georgia, a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce, certified, and also a candidate for designation of the Appraisal Institute. He is going to talk about what is the true value of your real estate property. All right, Mike, welcome. And you can take it from here.
Okay, will do. Thanks. All right, let's get started here. Okay.
That's Mike.
Yep. Oh, wrong presentation. There we go. All right. So why hire a certified appraiser? Or another way to look at it, why not just use Zillow or some online source? So let's discuss the alternatives to getting an appraisal first. So we have our online sources. That'd be Zillow, Redfin, and similar type online sources. Realtor.com, I guess you put in there as well. You have iBuyer sources. These would be OfferPad, OpenDoor, and similar type companies. We have the tax records or public records, previous appraisals, and information from a real estate agent. So looking at the online sources, you have to question what's the basis of their methodology of how they arrive at the number you see on the screen. A lot of these are proprietary and they do not release them. How is the gross living area computed? Sometimes these online sources include the basement, which is factored differently in an appraisal. Do they account for location differences? If your home sits on a lake or if it sits near power lines, how are these accounted for? Or if there's competitive homes that have these influences, how do they manipulate your value? Some of these sources can be manipulated by the owner of the home or surrounding owners. For example, Zillow, if you claim your property, you can go in there and change different attributes about it. And that may influence what it comes up with for a valuation number or other people's sales. These online sources also have no idea the interior condition. Your house could have significant updates, or it may not have any updates. These online sources do not know that. How are market conditions are handled? As we know, the market in many areas of the country is increasing. Some areas it's stabilized. So how is this accounted for? Many times these online sources rely on public records to get their information. And there's disclaimers that it's not a valuation product, and they don't disclose their algorithms, how they generate the value. Also, many of these companies now also buy and sell homes, and they offer loans. So how can they be unbiased in giving their opinion of value? The next source is iBuyer sources. Again, these are companies such as Open Door and OfferPad. They have a business model of buy low and sell high. After they come out and visit your property, after you get your initial offer online, the offer is likely to change. I've seen it change as much as 30% because the property was in a flood zone. They rely heavily on public records, and obviously they're biased towards the company interest to buy for the least amount. And their main purpose is to buy your property, then to resell it at a profit. The next alternative is to use tax records. Your assessed amount is figured completely different, where the tax assessor looks at all the recent sales in your neighborhood, or what it defines as a neighborhood, then makes adjustments based on the size. Oftentimes, the tax records have your property overvalued or undervalued. Sometimes the living area by tax records is based on heated area, not ANSI gross living area calculations. And oftentimes the living area is incorrect. I've seen off by as much as 1,000 square feet, both under and over. As we discussed, values are based on a county-defined tax neighborhood, not markets typical buyers consider. Again, the tax assessor has no idea of the interior condition unless you let them in your house, which most people do not. And also the tax assessors, they usually lag behind in changing markets and how that's addressed. And again, the purpose for this value is for tax assessment, not on market value determined for division of real estate assets for divorce. Some people may think, well, I just refied or I just purchased the property. I'll just use the previous appraisal I had. Well, you have a number of issues here. One, the intended user for that appraisal was for the lender. And mortgage appraisals are used for the lender to assess the risk of the collateral that they're putting the loan for. These reports are also done on forms designed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and they explicitly reference the appraisals for a mortgage transaction, not a divorce situation. Information from a real estate agent. Typically, when a real estate agent, they may do a BPO or a CMA, competitive market analysis. Usually it's done in some hopes of getting a listing. They also have a fiduciary and ethical responsibility to get the seller the highest price for the house, or if they're representing the buyer, to get the lowest price. Also, how did the real estate agent determine the living area? Did they measure the house? Did they rely on the public records, which, as we discussed, can be significantly off in living size? And what methodology did they use for their adjustments? How is the market determined? A competitive market analysis, or CMA, is not an appraisal. In Georgia, real estate agents cannot perform appraisals. So after discussing why using these other methods may not be the best option, let's discuss why it's best to get an appraisal. First and foremost, it's an unbiased opinion. Appraisal is an unbiased opinion of value. An appraiser has no bias in the report, and unbiased as far as taking sides. An appraisal is widely accepted by courts or mediators. There's no methodologies and procedures, and these should be discussed in the report. There's three approaches to value. There's a sales approach, which is most commonly referred to with comparable sales. There's a cost approach where we figure out what it would cost to build the same similar structure again and take out the depreciation. Cost approach is generally is not the most reliable once the home's more than 5 years old, due to trying to estimate depreciation. And there's the income approach, which is used if you have an income producing property, you can determine a value based on the income it produces. But if it's single family owner occupied, then income approach doesn't really apply. An appraisal has a single intended use. If it's for divorce, it would be determining the market value for a division of real estate assets. That's the use. And also, appraisers, when we renew our license, we sign documents saying that we will uphold the public trust. The credibility of the report is of essence in appraisal. Now, some things to talk about why we use a certified appraiser. There's a signed certification on a report that's unbiased. Be aware that there's different levels of licenses in Georgia. There's a registered appraiser, which is essentially a trainee. There's a licensed appraiser, which is they can appraise up to $1 million, but requires no degree and less class hours. There's certified residential, which I am, which allows me to appraise any residential property that I'm geographically competent to appraise. And there's certified general, which is a CG, and that's licensed to appraise commercial properties. A certified appraiser like myself, we have to have a 4-year degree. We have 200 hours of classroom hours in appraisal classes, and we have to have a minimum of 2,500 hours of field experience. Every year, we have to take 14 hours of continuing education. Then there's typically a full appraisal is what's done in divorce. That's where both the exterior and interior of the home is observed. We use public records as well as private databases, plus our observations. We define market and market conditions. And like I mentioned, the intended use is for division of real estate assets. And anytime I do divorce work, there's always an engagement letter that reaffirms with the client what the purpose of the appraisal is, the address, outlining the fees, and what approaches will be developed in the report. And again, moving on, reaffirming again, the appraisal report's widely accepted in courts of mediation. I would suggest that you use a certified residential appraiser, somebody who's experienced with divorce and non-lending assignments. Many times these require deeper analysis than mortgage and lending appraisals. Belong to a professional organization, should have other credentials. Myself, I am RSCSD certified, and they should be willing to take time to explain the process. I know in my divorce assignments, I take whatever time it is to explain with the clients what to expect. If they have questions after the report's delivered, I explain that. Or if they have questions when I'm at the home, I happily go over all that information, whatever they have questions about. There's also different report options. There's a full appraisal, which we talked about, where both the inside and outside are observed. There's a review appraisal. So if you've had a appraisal done for divorce and that, and you think something's not right with it, we can engage and do a review appraisal and review that. We can do an exterior only. Sometimes one party is not open to have an appraiser to go into the property. And so we do an exterior only. I just completed one of these for divorce yesterday. Then there's a desktop appraisal where I just rely on interviews and public information and information from databases and don't visit the property at all. And there's also an enhanced desktop where I can send an app to somebody and they take pictures of the interior and exterior and do the typical research and develop that and report from that information. And here's my contact information if you have any questions. I think we may have questions at the end. There is another slide. I want to touch on this for a bit. This is just a little off topic but this talks about what's going on in the market. This happens to be a typical graph that we have in the report when we do the market analysis. This happens to be for Lindley Middle School and South Cobb in the Mableton area. But I've seen the market look like this in parts of Cobb and parts of Gwinnett and other parts of the metro Atlanta area. Other parts I've seen where it's continuing to increase. But I want to point this out because I know sometimes the media talks about the market and the overall Atlanta market or whatever market you may be in may be increasing, which is true. But if you look at this market, the past 6 to 9 months, this market has leveled off, even though it does have almost 10% increase over the past year, which older sales that were used in this report did have a time adjustment, but more recent ones didn't because it shows the market's leveled off. So this is the type of analysis that you could expect from my firm, and you should expect from other firms if you get a divorce appraisal done to explain why certain adjustments are made or not made. But I do want to make you aware of, there's always buzz around the market going up, which it is. Some sub-markets are starting to level off. There's still some that are still increasing. I did an appraisal in Alpharetta just a few days ago, and that's still increasing at about 14% over the past year there. So anyway, that's what I have. If anybody has any questions, so I can answer now or at the end.
Thank you, Mike. That was great. And thank you for that additional information. I think we're going to hold all our questions till the
That's
end,
fine.
just so we can make sure that everybody has their time. And
Sure.
so I believe you can put questions in the chat as well. And so if you don't want to forget your question, go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll come back around to it. Okay, thank you again, Mike. Up next, we have Tony Scarpero. He is a certified divorce lending professional, a CDLP, and branch manager at North Point Mortgage. And he specializes in identifying appropriate mortgage financing and real estate strategies for divorcing clients while being able to identify potential hurdles or opportunities with regards to real estate financing and potential tax or legal concerns as they pertain to real estate and divorce. And I can tell you, all of that is extremely important when you are devising a divorce financial plan, as I do. So I work very closely with Tony in structuring, for instance, how much alimony does someone need in order to be able to qualify to buy the house from their spouse, right? So what Tony does additionally to what Mike does is extremely important. Tony knows that in the complex world of real estate finance, every client has a unique scenario, and having the foresight to anticipate and remove potential roadblocks in the transaction is critical to his success and his client's success, as is utilizing the latest technology to streamline the process. So Tony is going to talk about refinancing options and requirements. So Tony, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you for the awesome intro, Lisa. Let me make sure. All right, so we've got our presentation up today. So as Lisa mentioned, as a certified divorce lending professional, what we do is much, much more in depth than just your traditional, mortgage, loan officer. A lot of times people, when they're coming out of a divorce, they don't really get involved in looking at the mortgage planning until, quite honestly, until it's a little bit too late. The divorce is already finalized, and then they're reaching out to any number of different mortgage loan officers that they may find online, maybe through a friend. And what we really do is, and what I'm going to talk about today, are the 4 key phases of divorce mortgage planning and what those sub phases look like behind that. So step 1, a lot of times when I'm working with Lisa or someone like Lisa as a CDFA, or if there's not a CDFA involved and I've been referred from one of the parties' attorneys, then step 1 is to have a consultation with the client. And one of the first things we're going to do is in that consultation, finding out some information of vetting the property itself, and then looking at income, debts, and different solutions. So step 2 involved is going to be analyzing what their individual scenario looks like. And then in step 3, once we've been able to identify certain things, we're going to be able to help them and either someone like Lisa or their attorney to negotiate what's going to be an equitable split of the home and various assets. And then step 4 is going over those options. So to get a little bit deeper into what we do exactly in these different phases, and a lot of times our work in the front end of the consultations could literally be 6 months to a year before we actually get to step number 5 of actually doing the mortgage and doing a refinance. So the things that I'm going to talk about today are really more so geared towards somebody that's going to be the one retaining the home and refinancing it. But a lot of times, some of these same concepts are very important to understand if we're working with the party that's not being awarded the home and their intention is to purchase their own home after the divorce is finalized. So some of the things that we need to look at from vetting the house are going to be: how much are the property taxes every year? And are there any delinquent property taxes? Many times in a divorce scenario, there are a lot of different things that have been overlooked for some time. And it's not uncommon to see where there are delinquent property taxes that need to be factored into the overall equation of all the finances. Beyond that, we want to look at, are there HOA dues on the property? And the same thing there, are there any past due, delinquent HOA dues on the property that need to be brought up to current? Some other things about the property we need to know is whoever the one, actually either party, either the one that's keeping the home or the one that's departing from the home, are either of them both on title to the home? Are they both on the current mortgage to the house? Because if they are or they aren't, make some key differences of how they're going to be able to refinance and what sort of limitations that they may be able to refinance if they're looking to actually pull some equity out of the property in the refinance. So those are really the main areas that we want to find out about the property itself. Mike touched on having an appraisal done up front. This is also a key element that we need to figure out what the home is worth that we're looking to refinance and what the current balance is. We don't necessarily need to know exactly what it's worth today, but a very, very close idea so we can run some of our calculations. But one thing that's important to point out and understand is if a client goes and engages someone like Mike to have an appraisal done on the front end, that is very, very helpful for all of us to understand what that value is and what their intention and maybe dividing up the equity. But if they have an appraisal done, that is only meant for those purposes of establishing value up front. But unfortunately, due to lending laws that were put in place about 10 or so years ago, lenders actually can't take an appraisal that was done from the client for those purposes. So the lender would actually still have to order their own appraisal when we're at the point of actually doing the loan, which could be 6 to 12 months down the road. The next component that we want to look at is qualifying their income. So what does their gross income look like? Is Is it changing from maybe somebody, the one that's being awarded the home, if they haven't been working outside the home for a number of years and don't have any plans to now go and get a job outside of the home? Then we're going to really need to look at other sources of income. Or sometimes somebody that maybe has worked part-time hours and is going to be going to full-time hours. Or is that pay structure going to be based on an hourly rate and how many hours they're working? Or is it going to be a straight salary? That can make some big differences of how and when that they may qualify. And then outside of those, employment type incomes, are there other sorts of income that's already coming in of either Social Security or disability? And quite often in a divorce, the things that we're looking at are alimony or child support, as Lisa mentioned. And how do we navigate around structuring so that they have enough of either alimony or child support coming in either monthly, but also continuing for long enough to be able to use that income to qualify? Some of the things that are interesting to understand around that and why it's important to use someone like myself as a CDLP is that a lot of times the attorneys don't know what sort of a loan that somebody's going to try and qualify for after the fact. And they may put in some language that makes it very, very challenging, where they may only be awarding alimony for, say, exactly 3 years or maybe less than 3 years. And we commonly will see where they've structured it, it says that the refinance needs to happen within 90 days of the divorce being finalized and signed by the judge. The problem that you run into with that is most loan products are going to require that either alimony and or child support has been received by that person for at least 6 months and has at least a 3-year continuance from the time of closing that refinance. So it's very, very important to make sure that we get, when we're negotiating with the attorneys or a CDFA like Lisa, that we have the right timing involved to be able to do that. The other thing that we look at sometimes in income, especially in more of a high net worth client type of scenario, is we can a lot of times use assets in place of income, where we run some different calculations on a large sum of assets, either retirement assets or maybe it was a distribution from the assets that the couple had. And that could be either going through a trust or different ways to distribute that asset into an actual income stream, to use that method for qualifying as well. But again, these are things that if we know these well in advance and are able to strategically calculate those with the parties involved, it's a much better avenue to arrive at where they're trying to get to of that refinance. The other thing that we want to look at is, what does their consumer debt look like now and also in the future? So we're going to be looking at, what is that new future payment on the mortgage going to look like, including their taxes, insurance, and HOA dues? What do they have now for either car loans, credit cards, not shown here, but also student loans? And a lot of times student loans may be deferred, but there still has to be some sort of an assumed payment calculation on most loan types when somebody has deferred student loans. So the things that we want to look at very closely here is, in looking at somebody's credit report today and knowing that our transaction for the refinance might be 6 to 12 months down the road, are any of these debts that are showing on the person that's going to be retaining the home, are any of those debts going to be wiped out in the divorce and paid by the other party? Are some of these debts that shows on the credit report, are some of them simply authorized user accounts that need to be removed? So there's a lot of different things, of questions that we need to figure out of, what is the debt going to look like in the future once the divorce is finalized? And then lastly, the home equity solutions. A lot of times in a divorce, and especially right now where property values have been rising so rapidly, a lot of people, if they've bought a home 3, 5, 10 years ago or more, they may be sitting on their most valuable and the largest asset in the divorce could actually be the home. They could have hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity. A lot of times we see where the one that is not retaining the home and departing, that they're going to be awarded a certain lump sum of that split of the equity. So it's very important to understand how that can be done, because a lot of times traditional loan officers that don't understand all the intricacies and different rules in a divorce scenario may actually treat that loan as what they call a cash out refinance instead of a simple rate and term refinance. And the key distinction is, not only does a rate and term refinance get a lower interest rate than cash out, but it also, you're able to go to a higher loan to value, meaning on a traditional rate and term, you can typically go up to 95% of what the home is appraised for, versus on a cash out, you're generally going to be maxed out at either 80%, maybe sometimes 75%. And so if we know that they're trying to divide some of that equity, it is very, very important to be very closely aligned with their attorney or CDFA to make sure that the language is properly written into the settlement agreement so that they can actually tap into that equity and make that equitable division of that large asset. So if all of these steps through, consulting, analyzing, negotiating, and looking at what their different options are and the different components that go behind that, if all of that is done correctly and ahead of time, then step 5 of the closure, we're much better equipped to be able to provide for them a predictable outcome of what that's going to look like. So it really comes from, the knowledge, the insights, and supporting all the parties involved. And so, working with us and together as a team, a lot of times that means, as a certified divorce lending professional, that means working very, very closely with Lisa or someone like Lisa, and ideally working very close with the attorneys involved, so that everybody is working towards the same goal. And, and that is really the benefit with working with a CDLP on the front end, so that rather than running into a surprise 6 months, 12 months down the road of what everybody thinks that they're aiming towards, but then there's some language or some hurdles that it becomes either impossible or very, very difficult to go back and make those changes. I'm licensed personally here in Colorado, Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. My contact information here is on the side of yourdivorcemortgage.com is my website, that you can also enter your email and information there, and I can send out to you weekly updates specifically around mortgage financing and divorce scenarios. We don't send any kind of junk or spam, but it's very, very much detailed towards divorce scenarios. Or you can email me at tony.scarpero@fairwaymc.com. And lastly, schedule an appointment with me. There's no cost or any obligation. My work actually is one of the few in this industry that I am only paid on the back end when we actually successfully close a refinance or a purchase transaction for you. So there's no extra cost to using a CDLP like myself. If you're not in one of the states that I'm licensed in, still reach out to me. I know many, many CDLPs around the country that I can certainly refer you to someone in another state if it's not somewhere that I work. But definitely, there is a huge, huge benefit of working together as a team with a CDLP and everybody else involved.
Great information, Tony. And I cannot stress how important these pieces are, that you're valuing the real estate at the proper value, and that you're also working with someone. Oh, my video just disappeared here. And that you're working with someone who can assess up front what you need to do to fulfill whatever your obligations are post-divorce. I've been at this about 13, 14 years now, and I have seen so many disasters because in the beginning, I realized that attorneys didn't know the things they didn't know about this. And so many people would come to me after their divorce, people I had not worked with pre-divorce, and say, I've been told I have to refinance in 6 months, but I can't seem to get a loan anywhere. Well, again, they weren't set up properly from the beginning by seeing someone like Tony to assess, how do we make these things happen? And so this is critical for folks who want to stay in the home, purchase it from their spouse, or even buy another home. You know, when you get out there and you're now on your own and your spouse has kept the house, or you've sold the house and split the proceeds, what do you need in order to set yourself up for success afterwards? And I have every client go through a certified divorce lending professional to make sure that we are covering the bases so they can get the best outcome possible. So thank you for that, Tony. All right, up next, we have the wonderful Pam Evans. And Pam is an associate broker and realtor with Century 21. And she is a referral-only based business. And her designations include a lot of things, including the RCSD. I know someone had posted a question as what is an RCSD? That is a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce. I hold that designation, Mike does, and so does Pam. And it's very valuable information that we've learned in this training to help clients. She is also an MCNE, a Master Certified Negotiation Expert. Ooh, that sounds good. And she is part of the top 5% of Atlanta Realtors Association. She is a Centurion Award producer for Century 21 Corporate, partner in education with Forsyth County Schools, Rotary of South Forsyth 2021 board member, and member of both DivorcetownUSA.com and Amicable Divorce Networks, who we partner with. And I know that you are also the former president of the Atlanta I'm sorry, I'm messing that all up. Where we met.
Women's Council of Realtors.
Thank you. That's where we first met. And it was a pleasure speaking there and meeting you there. And it's just been wonderful having you as a resource ever since. So Pam, you are going to be speaking on when and how to use a real estate neutral and how to get the most from your investment. So this is good stuff, folks. Listen up, and you have the floor, Pam.
Thank you. And we're about to have a thunderstorm, so it could be like really an exciting presentation. So I apologize if the thunder is too loud, but thank you, Lisa, for that. We're really here today to talk about and to work off what Mike and Tony both talked about, but should I stay or should I sell? This thunderstorm has me nervous. When it might be good to sell instead of stay, how to sell when parties don't necessarily get along, and how to get your asking price, a very popular topic. So first, most important is eyes wide open and have the facts, because your home is really your largest, most expensive asset. So making an informed decision about whether to stay in the home or to sell it will really set your financial trajectory for the next several years. So if you're going to be the house spouse, the one who stays in the home, you want to know this information before heading to mediation. First, can you afford the home? What is the monthly expense to own this particular home? Your mortgage, your taxes, your insurance, utilities, the maintenance of the home. What is the condition of the home? Because that will determine the required maintenance. Are you going to need a new HVAC system soon? How is the plumbing? How's the electrical? How's the roof? And really just as important is you need to determine, do you want to stay in the home? Sometimes it can be just too much to manage. You might have some bad juju there. You just would like to get a fresh start. Or maybe it's just too expensive to stay there, especially if it's going to financially drain you or make your monthly budget tight. Nobody wants to be house poor. So the first tip is know the facts first, and then decide where you are emotionally, as the facts will help you navigate the emotion. Deciding to sell when you don't get along with your spouse, and as been covered today, is find an RCSD realtor, and that logo on the screen is the logo you would look for in somebody's credentials. A good realtor, particularly RCSD, understands the complications surrounding a divorce and will do their best to represent the house, meaning they'll do their best to represent both parties, be neutral, and help you get the highest sales price that the market will support. So ideally, you want to seek out an RCSD designated realtor, which is a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce. And they are trained to navigate divorce situations. An RCSD will advise you how to prepare your home for sale and give you a recommended strategy based on your personal circumstance. For example, do you have some funds to invest in getting the home market ready? Can we spend some money on paint? Paint color is the biggest game changer in getting a home ready, and maybe some fresh mulch, some fresh landscaping. Whatever you, what you want to do is make sure that whatever you invest, you want to invest wisely, get money back. What you're looking for is ROI. You want a return on your investment. So if you're going to spend some money to get your home market ready, you want to ensure you're going to get that back plus some more. And if you have $0 to invest in getting your home market ready, there are strategies for that as well. So an RCSD will be good about communicating with each of you so that you don't necessarily have to communicate with each other if it's a little bit tense, but we'll do our best to ensure that everybody is on the same page. Second tip is to work with your RCSD realtor to come up with the best game plan that meets your objectives. Either it's a fast sale, the highest sales price, or a balance of both. How to get your asking price. Nobody ever asked me about this. Let's see, an RCSD realtor also provides sound guidance with the following. For example, should you get a pre-listing inspection? I personally think this is a very wise thing to do because it helps you avoid surprises during the inspection period with your buyer, where you have the pressure of negotiation and contract timeframes. And it also helps you reduce stress. If there is an important repair that needs to be made that came up during your pre-listing inspection, you'll have some more time to shop around to determine who's the best contractor for the job. And this report, your inspection report, will also give you an understanding of items that buyers may have concerns about. So it definitely minimizes stress and gives you a heads up without the panic of being under contract. Your realtor should, all in the name of helping you get your asking price, recommend the paint color that it will appeal to the largest buyer pool. Interior, exterior, I just did one this past weekend. Color absolutely matters, and sometimes the most. If you can believe it, it is true. They can recommend how to declutter. If you have a lot of furniture, sometimes people have been living in their house for 20, 25 years and you accumulate a lot of stuff. Maybe it's time to sell some of that furniture or store some of it in your garage. But less is more. Less clutter, less furniture will make your home look bigger and open and airy and with the right paint color. Do you see where I'm going? Handle staging. I like to have my stager come in and we'll bring out some nice artwork, some just charming decorative things to put on the counter, strategically placed in the bathroom that appeals to the camera. That's what this is all about. Is every photo in your listing should have a purpose and look good and inspire prospective buyers to come tour your home. Professional photography, and for goodness sake, you never want to skimp here. Photos, quality photos are paramount. I'm sure you've experienced where you're online looking at homes and sometimes you get turned off by a home because the photos don't look good, they're dark, or there's clutter all over the kitchen counter, or that my personal pet peeve, the toilet seats are up. So this will be your first introduction of your home to prospective buyers. So we do not want to blow it. And solid marketing, getting your listing in front of as many qualified buyers as possible. I like to target both realtors representing buyers as well as buyers directly. Why wouldn't I want to put your property in front of as many buyers as possible? And lastly, and very important, is pricing it correctly. And I cannot stress this enough. Please listen, my commercial, please listen to what your realtor recommends, not what your neighbor suggests or your best friend tells you. A realtor will assess market conditions. And we will, of course, work with Mike and his appraisal. If we already have that in hand, bonus. That's a great tool for us to have. But we assess market conditions for that particular point in time. We look at comps from closed sales and recent comps. The market is changing so dramatically right now. It used to be that you could look 6 months back. I ideally like to look at the past 3, no further than 3 months out. We'll look at active listings, which is your competition. and what the trends are, what is happening in your geographic area, in your school district, in your neighborhood. So we look at all of that. And what has worked really well for me over the past few months is pricing homes really at market value, not trying to push the envelope too high, but starting at market value and letting buyer competition drive the purchase price up, because that allows you to negotiate protection for yourself and certainly drive the price higher, because the better pricing you have on your house, the more buyers you will attract. And I promise you, you will end up with a better result. If you start too high, it can put you at risk in other ways. So the last tip is that the market changes constantly, but there's no need to go it alone. You have a team of people here presenting that we all work together and can help you successfully. With the right guidance, you'll be able to accomplish your house goals successfully with the least amount of stress possible. So that, in a nutshell, is the realtor section. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam. Those are some great tips, folks. And I will tell you that at one point in time, I had a house for sale a few years back. Just wasn't getting the traction that I expected. And Pam, as a friend, came in and took a look and gave me a few marketing tips. And within days, we had the house under contract. So it really helps to have someone who's experienced, knowledgeable about the divorce world and divorce, and can come in and give you some valuable information. Get your household with that thunder going on.
Sorry about that.
All right.
It's part of my presentation. Wow, she's good.
We like to have fun here too. They gotta have some levity in life, right? Through life storms as well. So let me bring all the panelists, if you would, come back on. And now we're going to take some questions. It looks like we've got some great questions going on here. Marcella, I'm going to ask you if you'd read those for us, because some of them were sent privately, and then we'll see who we can get to answer.
Sounds good. We'll start right from the beginning. Does the appraisal take into account the condition of the home if there's a lot of deferred maintenance?
Mike, I think that's one for you.
Oh, I didn't hear the question. Sorry.
So does the appraisal take into account the condition of the home if there's a lot of deferred maintenance?
The only person we can hear, Lisa, is you.
You're not hearing Mike? I can hear you. I can hear Mike.
I can hear you, Lisa, but I didn't hear the question.
Marcella. Okay, let me read the question. Sorry, folks, some technical difficulties. The question is, does the appraisal take into account the condition of the home if there is a lot of deferred maintenance? So when you are doing an appraisal, Mike, do you take into account, make any adjustments for deferred maintenance, for things that need to be repaired, condition? Tell us about that.
Yeah, most definitely. The condition, any deferred maintenance is definitely taken into account. Typically, it's only what is visible. I'm not cutting in any walls or moving furniture. I mean, if the occupant knows of things that need to be done, that's great. Or if I see things I observe, that's definitely taken into account. Obviously, I try and find comparables that have similar condition. If I can't, then I may apply an estimated cost to cure adjustment to all the comparables. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay. I think from our training that one thing appraisals does not take into account are any title issues, right? You disclaim those because
that's correct.
Title issues, right?
Yes.
But other than that, you're going to make adjustments for things that we're talking about here.
Yeah, if there's defective siding or there's holes in the walls, or the floor carpet's worn out, or maybe the linoleum's torn or something like that. A bathroom's not functioning. Those types of things. I mean, if it's extensive deferred maintenance, I'd really like to see a contractor's estimate, because I'm not a home inspector, I'm not a contractor, but minor deferred maintenance, I don't have a problem. I hope that helps out.
Okay, Kim, I hope that answered your question. Next up, we have from Kathy, review appraisal. This is an option to the other party getting their own appraisal? So I think she's saying the review appraisal that you mentioned, Mike, if
Yes.
parties can't agree on a first appraisal, they can get a second appraisal from another party called a review appraisal, and rather than getting two full appraisals. Is that right?
That's correct. The original appraisal can be reviewed for thoroughness and completeness, and to see if there was any better comparables at the time when that appraisal was done.
Okay. And I'm assuming there's probably a lower cost to a review appraisal versus or no?
Not typically so, because it's almost the same amount of work. It may be slightly reduced. It would have to depend on the situation in the property in question.
Okay.
Right.
But this would be a better option versus getting two appraisals. Why?
Well, because typically when somebody orders another appraisal, it may not be done. It may be done a month or so after the first appraisal was done. And if the appraisal was done, if the second appraisal is done as of that date, then as Pam mentioned, the market's ever changing. You could have some fluctuations there. Unless when you ordered the second appraisal, it was done as a retrospective appraisal back to when the effective date of the first appraisal.
I see.
We do several of those as well.
Okay, so there's different ways to go about this if there's questions around the appraisal. Got it.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Mike. And Kathy,
Yeah.
I hope that answered your question. Elizabeth asked, what is an RCSD? And that is a real estate collaboration specialist in divorce. And you can see that it can be held by multiple industries, such as myself, a CDFA, appraisers hold the designation, and realtors as well. Mostly it's realtors, by the way, at this point in time.
Yeah.
Okay. Rachel asked, do appraisals consider repairs that are needed when determining the value of the house? For example, out of code plumbing, broken sewer main, and damaged siding. I think you touched on this a little bit, but what about things that are out of local ordinances, like things that are too older and now they need to be brought up to code?
Yes, that's probably not taken into account. I mean, every city and county has their own codes. So, and I'm not the code police, but unless something had extensive plumbing updates, new plumbing, the comparables probably have similar type situation if they're about the same age. So that would be kind of taken into account there. Now, if something had mentioned that had all new plumbing, then there's likely that home sold for more because it would have been updated or renovated.
How would you compare that with the others? Would it be noted in their appraisals?
It would be if something had new plumbing, it most definitely would be noted in the MLS listing when it was sold, and the likelihood of selling, it most likely sold higher than something without updated plumbing. So part of that difference would be an adjustment between that comparable and the subject property.
Okay.
If I could jump in for a sec on that one.
Oh, yes, Pam.
Code changes all the time, and it's not really a hardship when you're selling if something is not to code, unless it's now a new code because the old code that usually would be grandfathered to you is broken or unsafe or a safety hazard. It shouldn't present too much of a problem. Now, if it's a very, very old house, and then that's a special circumstance.
Okay, good point. Good point. And so I think, if those things are of concern for someone, having a home inspection is also something that you might want to add to the mix of professionals here. I will say that a lot of people don't think of getting their home inspected when they're buying from their spouse. Very few transactions happen that way. And I always try to encourage people to let me know what kind of repairs does the home need. Get some estimates on that. With clients, we try to factor those things in, and even get a home inspection. Sometimes there are underlying issues that you may not be aware of, foundation issues, roof issues, big ticket items. So that's another piece of all of this that we didn't have time to delve into, but I wanted to mention. Okay, next question comes from Kim. She says, I was told by a mortgage lender to wait until after the divorce to call about refinancing. Why do you say to start 6 months in advance? Well, it looks like Tony has dropped off the call, but I can tell you, Kim, that this is vitally important. If you wait to find out what it takes for you to qualify, or even if you can qualify to refinance or to purchase something new, you cannot have your divorce changed afterwards. So for instance, if I am in a situation with a client who wants to buy the house from her spouse, and we need to see what kind of income does she need to have coming in, and how many months of that income, for how long has she been doing that. A lot of times we have stay-at-home moms going back to work, and they may not have been working 6 months yet. So we can't even start to consider that income for 6 months. So now this 36-month rule that Tony talked about, we need to add on 6 months and then a few months. I try to go at least 4 years when we've got a refi going on, to give people a little wiggle room, because you don't want to be unable to refinance because you went over by a month and now they can't qualify you. There's those kinds of situations happen. So it's really important that you talk to someone who understands divorce and lending prior to your negotiations, because that can all be factored in. I'm able to tell what a client needs as far as alimony, and if they're getting child support, what are the needs that we have, so that we can back into that alimony number and support that number so that they can do the refi. If you wait till after the divorce and you're ordered to refi and you don't make enough money to qualify, or you don't have enough time left to do the refi, now what? Now you've got to go back to court and fight and tell the judge, these terms won't work. And that will cost you a lot more money. I have had people come to me after their divorce where these exact situations happened. The attorneys brought me in, said, how can we fix this? Really, the house needs to be sold. And the parties spend more after the divorce in legal fees than they did prior to getting divorced. So it's vitally important to know that information. Okay, Gail asked, I was awarded half of my ex's federal retirement. Processing could take several months before payout actually begins. Will I have to wait until payout actually begins before I can start the refi process? Or will the settlement agreement and the retirement court orders be sufficient to get started? That is a great question. I am not able to answer that for you, but I would definitely reach out to Tony, because
Hey, Lisa, I actually hopped back on. My connection dropped off, but I heard the tail end of your last answer to a question, and reading this one from Gail. So it depends. That's a really, really great question about that sort of income, because that's going to be a little bit different than when we're looking at income that's been awarded of alimony or child support. So it's hard to really answer this question without seeing the way that the actual settlement statement or settlement agreement was written, and also what the terms of that retirement plan are. If that retirement is paid out for life of a pension to the ex, and that's now being awarded. But bottom line from her question was, do I need to wait for all of that to start before starting the refinance process? So there's a difference in really starting the refinance process and completing and closing that refinance. So we can always start a refinance process, and we can go through certain aspects of it, having the home appraised, having other things reviewed. And that portion of the income, if it maybe hasn't started yet, could end up being one of the underwriter's conditions to actually making that loan. So while we're maybe waiting for a month or two for that portion of qualifying to happen, and we've already seen it in the settlement agreement, and we just need documentation from whoever that pension company is or whoever's paying out that income, that's something that can always be rectified and cleared as an underwriting condition at the very, very end of it, so that you're not necessarily delaying starting the overall process and putting the whole refinance of closure to several months down the road.
Excellent. Excellent. So again, reaching out to your professionals prior to signing off on anything. Don't sign on the dotted line and you understand all of these things, whether it is getting divorced or buying a house or anything. Understand what you're getting into up front. Okay, we are coming down to the end of the call here, so I'm going to look at a couple more questions. Excuse me. Kim asks, "What about cash-only offers? Are these the highest price I can get for the house?"
No.
Why would a person want to take a cash-only offer, Pam, versus a financing offer?
Are you talking about? It depends on who the cash buyer is. If it's one of the iBuyers that Mike mentioned, that they will typically give you a reasonable upfront offer, but that is completely contingent on a convenience fee, and after inspection, they're going to take off more. So the source of the cash, if it's an individual who just has a lot of cash and wants to pay, it's up to your agent to vet the buyer and work with their agent. But there's nothing wrong with taking a cash offer depending upon the source and comparing it to a loan and how secure the loan is. It's also your agent's job to verify that that loan has been pre-approved. Nothing is done until you get to closing, but you have to evaluate each offer. Does that make sense?
Does to me. I hope that helps you, Kim. Yes, you definitely want to look at all the offers. A lot of times people typically want a discount when they're paying cash only. And if you don't want to deal with worrying about whether somebody's loan is going to fall through, then, cash can be great, but you may take less money sometimes. So those are some things to consider.
And it depends on the terms of the offer as well. Is there a termination clause in there, a due diligence period, or is it just based on inspection? I mean, there's so many elements that go into which is the right offer to accept.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you, Pam. I think we've got one more question here from Elizabeth. She says, "It's a gray divorce. I'm a 61 with a 20-year-old college student and a 25-year-old who does work but has autism, so she'll be a bit delayed in launching. I don't want to stay in the house forever, but love the supportive community. Would it make sense to refi the house for just a few years? I know my situation will be quite different in the next 5 years." So Tony, I want to see if you're still here.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. I just want to speak to that. I'm not sure how you can structure your divorce, Elizabeth, if we've got a divorce already happened. I'm not sure where you are in the divorce process, I should say. One thing you have to watch out for is, can you get too far out into this? Are you looking to sell in the next 5 years? Can you put a little bit more information, Elizabeth, into the chat, even if it's private, just so we understand what you're trying to accomplish here? I also want to say, some people will stay in the house for a few years because they've got children who want to graduate or something. You've got to be aware of going past the 6-year mark, because then you may lose some tax. You may have tax consequences. You may lose some of your favorable tax status. So there's things that you need to look out for now and in the future. I'm not sure if Elizabeth is still here. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Tony. I don't really understand the
yeah
here to be able to answer.
Yeah, I think the only things I would add is, Lisa, assuming that the divorce is finalized at this point, and if Elizabeth is asking, does it make sense to refinance if she's only going to stay in that property for 5 years? It depends. That's a really hard one to answer without seeing a little bit more details. But depending on what her motivation for refinancing is, if it's to pull cash out to do improvements or pay off other debts, or if it's simply to lower the rate and payment to free up some cash flow, then some things that we would look at would be, what is the current interest rate that she may have on the property, and what would the new interest rate be? And also, importantly, looking at what would the overall cost of that transaction of refinancing costs, and what is that break-even period? You know, in today's super low interest rate environment, we're seeing sometimes closing costs, the repayment or recovering that initial cost could be as short as 12 to 24 months. So if she's going to be there for 5 years, that could make sense. Or depending on what their current rate is, if the refinance, if the interest rate can be calculated as what they call a lender paid, where the lender is covering those closing costs and the interest rate and still getting a better rate than what they have now, then there really is no downside, because you're not adding any sort of cost and not having to calculate a return on a break-even period. So even if they sold the house in 2 years from now, if it didn't cost anything to refinance and got a lower rate and was able to free up some cash flow, then there's really not a downside to that. But everybody's finances and scenario is different. So it's hard to really answer that question without seeing, without knowing a little bit more details.
Sure. And Elizabeth does say that they haven't started the divorce yet, so they're just examining things, and that's good that you are here, Elizabeth, and learning these things. And definitely, you want to, again, assess your options, know your options. You do have options because you are looking into this early. We don't want to get people to the other side and have no clue that they've lost all their options because they had not assessed this up front. So Elizabeth, I encourage you to reach out to any of us here and see how we can help you, guide you. I'm not sure where you're located. If you're not in the Atlanta area or anywhere of the markets that we all serve, I do coaching and consulting as well as full analysis, but I do coaching and consulting across the country and full analysis in the state of Georgia. But we can help you find others who are not in our area, just so we make sure that you're getting the right information from the right person. We're glad you're here too, Elizabeth. We're glad all of you that are with us are here today, and we hope that you have learned some things that will help make your life better going into the next chapter of your life. And we welcome you to come back again for our next session next month. And we're going to be talking then about, do I really need an attorney? The dangers of do-it-yourself divorce. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of dangers in that. So yes, you do need an attorney. There's different ways to use attorneys. There are different options for getting divorced, just like there are different options for the things that we talked about here. So yes, I hope you'll come back August 31st, 2021 at 4:00 p.m. And in September, we're going to be talking about protection essentials during divorce. We've got you covered. So we are here to help you. Reach out through divorcetownusa.com to find any of the professionals you've seen here today. And we hope that you have a better future for your family, your finances, and your overall life. And thank you for attending today. Take care now. Bye-bye. Oh, Gail, you're asking about support group meetings. We have the Divorce Help and Hope support group. You can find us on meetup.com, and it also